Lesson 7.3, Equations with the Distributive Property. Lesson 7.3, Equations with the Distributive Property.
Hey, let's solve the equation. 5 times m minus 3 plus 1 equals 21. Okay, lots of stuff going on here. This is definitely a multi-step equation. And the thing to notice is that the parentheses are there. That's a cue that we have to first undo that parentheses. That takes priority. So what we have to do is use the distributive property to take the 5 and actually multiply it through by the m, and then also multiply it through by the 3, and then subtract the 2. So we've got to remember to distribute. Okay, so if we distribute, what do we see? What we see is 5m minus 15. You see 5m minus 15 plus 1 equals 21. All right, well now I can actually combine terms. There's no other m's there except for the 5m, but here I have negative 15 plus 1 is negative 14, and that equals 21. And so now what can I do? Well, now I want to get the m's all by themselves. I want to undo the subtracting of 14 by doing what? Well, by adding 14 to this side. And to keep things balanced, I'll add to the other side. So everything is fair. All is fair in a balanced equation. 5m, and this 14 minus 14 is 0. And here I have 35. And then I want to undo the multiplication by 5 to get m all by itself. So I divide both sides by 5. And so m equals 35 divided by 5 is 7. So the answer is m equals 7. So again, a multi-step equation just requires us to think about orders of operation and carefully go through. In this case, the parentheses take priority. I have to distribute first, and then combine the constants, then isolate the m, and then divide. Cool.
Example 2, using the distributive property on both sides.
You know, we've seen the distributive laws lots and lots of times, but now I want us to look at it together in an equation where we actually, to solve for x, we're going to use some really cool distributive laws. Let's check out a wonderful example. So I want us to solve for x, and check out this equation. 3/5 times the quantity, x plus 12, equals 3 times the quantity, 6 minus x. So here's the challenge. How do you untangle all of that? Well, what I see here is that I've got some parentheses. That's a real important clue. And that in front of each of these parentheses, notice there's a number. On the left-hand side, it's 3/5. On the right-hand side, it's 3. And what that tells me is that this 3/5 is multiplying everything inside of there. That's the distributive law. What it means is, what I have to do is make sure that I take 3/5 and multiply it by, multiply it by the x, and also multiply it by the 12. And similarly, the 3 has to multiply the 6, and also has to multiply the x. So that's what we have to do. But if we can make life easier, we should definitely make life easier first. So I'm going to actually, before doing that, I'm just going to now get rid of all that stuff, because I am not a big fan of the fraction 3/5. So we can actually simplify this a little bit by getting rid of that fraction. Well, how do you do that? Well, this is actually 3 divided by 5. To undo the division, we could multiply both sides by 5. If you multiply both sides by 5, life will get a little easier. So whenever you want to make life easier, do it. If you don't want to, then just distribute the 3/5. The point is, there are lots of different and all acceptable correct ways of solving equations. You've got to find the one that resonates with you. So I'm going to show you what resonates with me. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. So here we go. So I'm going to have 5 times 3/5 quantity x plus 12 equals, and then if I did it on the left, got to do it on the right, 5 times 3 times x, 6 minus x. I'm going to make those x's really curly so you know what the multiplication is and what the x is. A little tricky. All right, well now we can actually simplify this. I've got 5 times 3/5. That's just going to actually equal 3. So you see how nice this is? It simplifies nicely. I still have the quantity x plus 12. And then on this side, I see 15 times the quantity 6 minus x. And so now I still have those parentheses, so I still have distributive stuff to do, right? So I'm going to use the distributive law and multiply here and then multiply here. But now it's all whole numbers, so it's a lot easier for me. So I just like it better. So here we go. When we distribute, what I see here is 3 times x. That's just 3x. Plus, and then here I see 3 times 12, which is 36. So check out what just happened. Notice the parentheses went away, and instead I made sure that 3 multiplied each of those terms, and I'm still adding. Similarly here, I'm going to take 15 times 6, which is 90, and then now minus 15 times x, which is 15x. Okay, great. So now what do? Well, now I'm just going to solve like we always solve. We want to get all the x's on one side and all the numbers on the other. So the first thing I think I'll do is I'll take this negative 15x, and I want to get rid of that. So to undo that, I'm going to actually add 15x to this side, which means I have to add 15x to this side. And when I do that, what's the result? Yep. Well, on this side I have 3x, and I add 15 more x's, so I'm going to have about 18 x's. And then here I have plus 36, and that equals 90. And then minus negative 15x plus 15x is just 0, so all I get is 90. So this is great progress. Now I want to undo the addition of 36 because I just want x's alone. So now I'm going to undo that by subtracting 36 from both sides. And what happens when I do that? Well, let's see. Here I have 18x, but now I have 36 minus 36, so that is equal 0. And then here I have 90 minus 36, and 90 minus 36 is 54. Great. Well, now you know what we have to do. I want to undo the multiplication of 18 by x, and so I'll just divide both sides by 18. And so if I divide both sides by 18, divide by 18, divide by 18, and pick up the action up here on the right, here this simplifies to just x, and this, of course, simplifies to just 3. And so I see the answer is that x equals 3. So using the distributive laws, we were able to see that we could solve for x, and you can check. If you let x equal 3 and plug in 3 and 3 here, you'll see these two sides balance perfectly. The distributive laws are really important. We've seen them a lot with numbers, but now we can even see them when x's are involved in equations. And by carefully thinking about what they mean, and maybe simplifying a little bit first to make life a little easier for us, we can conquer any equation and always solve for x. Have fun solving for x in your life, hopefully using the distributive laws. I'll see you soon.
Example 3, solving a real-world problem using the distributive property. Example 3, solving a real-world problem using the distributive property.
You know, the distributive property isn't just for doing fun math equations for math class. In fact, you can take the distributive property with you on vacation. In fact, lots of applications in the real world require us to use the distributive property. Let me show you one where we can see the distributive property recreated. Check it out. So the Andersons spend 12% of their budget on travel. Their total budget this year is $1,500 more than last year. And this year, they plan to spend $5,640 on travel. Here's the riddle. What was their total budget for last year? Now, there is so much information. You can see it all swimming around. We've got to make meaning of it. We've got to make meaning of it, so we have to figure out what's going on. So the question we're trying to figure out is, What was their total budget last year? That's the big question mark. That's the thing we don't know. Let's call it X. So let's let X be their total budget last year. And I'm actually going to write that down. So let's let X equal last year's budget. And now our mission is to see if we can figure out what X equals. Okay, so now we have to read through everything and figure out exactly what we have. So they spend 12% of their budget on travel. Okay, fine. Now, their total budget this year is $1,500 more than last year. Now, that really is important. Let's parse that. $1,500 more than last year's. Last year's budget we're calling X. So if we take X and we increase it by $1,500, that means we add $1,500, then that's going to give us their total budget for this year. Aha! So let's write that down. So if I write X plus $1,500, that represents the total budget this year. Now, we know from the very first thing we were told that they spend 12% of their entire budget on travel. So that means if we take 12% of this, that's going to be how much they're going to spend this year on travel. Because remember, that's the total budget they have for this year. It's $1,500 more than last year. Okay, so what's 12% of this? Well, 12% of is my Q, that's multiplication, and 12%, that means I have to multiply by 0.12. So it looks like 0.12 times that. But that's not what I wrote. What I wrote was 0.12 times just X alone. I want to make sure that it's 0.12 times all of that. I've got to therefore lasso that in a set of parentheses. And that's where the distributive law is going to come into play here. So it's really important to see that I've got to take 12% of all that stuff, which means I've got to lasso it all together. Okay, in fact, yeah, you know what? I like that idea. So those parentheses, you see, really are a lasso. Isn't that great? Oh, what a great idea. Okay, now, so 12% of that is going to be their travel budget for this year. But we know how much they want to spend. $5,640. So this has to equal, right? This is 12% of that is their travel budget, and their travel budget is $5,640. We just set up an equation to figure out what X is, and that was what we want to find out, last year's budget. So look how long it took us to figure out exactly what to write down. The rest of it now is the kind of solving for equations that we've done before. But in my mind, setting up the right equation is the tricky part. So just think through how we did it together. We figured out what this year's budget is in terms of last year's budget. We know that we want 12% of that, and that's going to equal what they're going to spend this year on travel. So there we have it. Okay, now we just get to solve for X. This is awesome. First thing we do is we see it's 0.12 times this entire quantity. That means we have to use the distributive property to make sure that everything is hit by that 0.12. So what this equals is 0.12 times X plus 0.12 times 1,500. And that equals, and on this side we've done nothing, so it's just the same number. And so this is 0.12 times X plus, and if you multiply 1,500 by 0.12, we see 180, and that equals 5,640. So you know what we have to do now. We want to undo the addition of 180, so we subtract 180 from both sides. This is so much fun. This is why people love math. All right, so here I just get 0.12x. 180 minus 180, that's a 0. That's the whole point of that. So that equals this. And then here I have 5,640 minus 180. And so that gives me 5,460. Great. Now all I want to do is undo the multiplication by 0.12. So you know how to do that. All we have to do is divide both sides by 0.12.